George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Little Rishi Sunak is on the point of quitting and being replaced by Lord DavidCameron. Never happened before in the middle of a general election campaign, but then nowadays so many things that have never happened before suddenly happen. Little Olaf Scholz, little soldier Scholz, has lost the German European Parliament elections to the Faragist AfD, right-wing nationalist party in Germany. I'm supposed to weep at the defeat of a socialist prime minister at the hands of a right-wing AfD party, but somehow the tears just won't fall. And killer Benny Gantz has quit killer Netanyahu's government in Israel, almost certainly beginning the collapse of Netanyahu's coalition and his fall from office and from grace as he heads for prison. And our clip from Wednesday of my monologue on the obscenity of little Zelensky on the beaches of Normandy when Russia, the country which took 8 out of every 10 casualties in the Second World War, 8 out of every 10 Nazis who died in the Second World War died at the hands of the Russians. Little Zelensky was there, but so were the Germans. The Russians were not. Our clip, translated into Russian, has achieved 1 million views in 48 hours. And some of tonight's will too. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Oh, I forgot to mention President Joe Biden doing it in his trousers on the stage at the Normandy commemoration. I'll try and get back to that if you get my drift. But starting with the extraordinary story that is breaking this evening, that little Rishi Sunak, who made the colossal blunder of beginning a general election months before any of his MPs imagined that it was going to be held, before 184 Tory candidates had even been picked, and who then proceeded to fall over every tiny obstacle, make a mess of every single event, and short of his trousers falling down, live on national television, there's not much more that could go wrong for little Rishi. I'm supposed to feel sorry for him, but I'm afraid it couldn't happen to a nicer fellow. And he has the compensation of being the richest prime minister Britain ever had. He's got a green card in his pocket, and he's off to California in the morning or the morning after. The proximate reason for this dramatic turn of events is that Rishi Sunak is predicted to lose his own parliamentary seat, along with maybe hundreds of his parliamentary colleagues losing theirs. Yes, that's right. Count Binface, his rival in Richmond in Yorkshire, one of the safest Tory seats in the whole country, formerly held by William Hague, is on the list of losses for the Conservatives on the 4th of July. It is a truly astounding turn of events. It is unprecedented. We have never before, ever, had a Prime Minister call an election and then quit in the middle of that election. There's no MPs, there's no parliamentary 1922 committee to have a vote of no confidence, to appoint a new leader, and so the men in grey suits are back. And they are going to, I'm told, from the most impeccable of sources, appoint Lord DavidCameron as his interim successor. I've got to say, the only way is up, David, even with your ermine on and your financial scandals tumbled out of the closet, your tax haven, Golden Islands in the Caribbean, your record on foreign affairs and on other things. The only way is up. You could only do a better job than Rishi Sunak. I mean, Huggy the Bear could only do a better job than Rishi Sunak. There's a hilarious video online of Americans being asked what they think of Rishi Sunak. And most of them ask, what's that? Not who's that, but what's that? As Joe Biden famously said, Rashid Sunak, go figure, the new British Prime Minister is for the off. Now, I think this will improve the Tories' fortunes from the currently catastrophically miserable levels at which they stand, but it certainly won't save their government. And DavidCameron won't be leader for long. I think the fragrant Penny Mordaunt is almost certain to get it, except there's a vile character called Braverman, another one or two vile rivals who will capitalize on the big decision the Tories have got to make. Do they go nice? Do they go nasty? Do they try and distinguish themselves from Mr. Nasty, Nigel Farage, who's back in the frame and is vaulting forward for the Reform Party in their national opinion poll standings? Will they go nice to differentiate themselves from him, in which case it must be the bouffon, Penny Mordaunt, surely. She even sounds as if she might be European. But if they go nasty, they'll go for Badenoch or Braverman, or maybe both of them. Wouldn't that be a rival for Nigel Farage? Couldn't get nastier than those two people. But one way or another, Reform are going to take over the Tory party. They'll either formally take over or they will supplant it, just as Labour supplanted the Liberals in the early first 25 years or so of the 20th century. So in the first 25 years of the 21st century, the Reform right-wing nationalists will take over the Conservative Party, formally or informally. Now, I'm asked to shed a tear by every Liberal commentator in the land that the socialist Prime Minister of Germany has lost the German election. In the European Parliament elections, which were held on Friday and over this weekend and are now being counted, the Farage party in Austria has triumphed and the Farage party in Germany has won the election. Little soldier Scholz is as socialist as Adolf Hitler. He is wedded to war, wedded to neoliberalism, wedded to everything that is the opposite of socialism. And so I have zero sympathy for him. His flag, his name as a socialist means nothing to me. It is the beef that I'm interested in. So where's the beef with little Scholz? Well, he has presided over the absolute collapse of the German economy, the absolute bankruptcy of the German government's foreign policy, a policy of belligerence and war towards their neighbor Russia, who occupied a part of their country, who liberated their people from Nazism. They have turned Russia into a bogeyman, and in so doing, they have presided over the deindustrialization of their country. So hell mend little Scholz. I don't have to support the AfD to hope that they will at least act in Germany's interest, rather than act in the interests of the United States. Because Scholz did all of this on the orders of the lunatic Joe Biden, whose conduct at the commemoration, 80th anniversary of the brave men and the thousands of martyrs who fell on the beaches at Normandy along the coastline in 1944 on June 6th and began the liberation of a part of Western Europe. His conduct was unbecoming even of him. It's one thing to soil yourself in front of His Holiness the Pope. At least the moving cameras were not there. The moving bowels were, however, caught on moving cameras on stage in Normandy. Anyone who's got a toddler knows the positions that were being struck. And everyone who's ever had a toddler knows that it can smell quite bad quite quickly after it. And Mrs. Biden clearly caught the whiff of the situation and led him away from the other leaders and presumably off for a shower. At least one hopes so. But the situation of Germany is now in a crisis situation. I think that the German government needs to repair its relations with Russia, needs to pull out of the NATO front, and needs to tell Joe Biden that Germany will not destroy itself for the edification of an administration here today, gone tomorrow in Washington. But I don't have any confidence that that's what they will do, because I've seen Meloni. I saw the Farage victory in Italy. I saw Meloni and I knew her reputation. She was an Italian nationalist. She was going to stand against the European Union. She was going to stand against NATO, and in fact has become one of the most slavish clients of the American pattern of vassal states in Western Europe. I have seen how Le Pen, full of right-wing anti-monopoly, anti-globalist rhetoric, has trimmed and trimmed and trimmed all of that rhetoric and is now really a common or garden nationalist with no intention of confronting Washington on behalf of her people. And I've seen Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage is cheeky chappy, an eloquent man of the people type, gin and jag and golf club bore type fellow who strikes a chord with the English, with the lower middle class in England and some of the working class in England. But I've seen him transformed from a Britain firster into an Israel firster. I've seen him transformed from a Britain first to an American first politician. So I have no confidence that any of the so-called far-right nationalist organizations will be anything other than a new crop of sycophants for Washington. But we will see. Benny Gantz leaving the Netanyahu government in Tel Aviv is of greater significance to world events. The situation now in Israel is so febrile you could cut it with a knife. The hundreds of thousands who are out demonstrating practically nightly for the downfall of Netanyahu and for a new election, to pick a new government, to take a new policy towards freeing the hostages and repairing their ruptured relations with the United States, is now unstoppable. And Gantz has read the room. He's decided to leave Netanyahu before the public left him. And this is of grave significance for Netanyahu because, as everyone now knows, if you are a regular on the mother of all talk shows, this is edition number 350, by the way. Big congratulations to all my colleagues and to all of you in the audience. 350 episodes under our belt. But if you are a regular, you already know that losing office means losing liberty for Benjamin Netanyahu. He's a convicted criminal whose imprisonment has only been stayed because of the partial immunity that he enjoys as Prime Minister. When he's no longer Prime Minister, he's no longer free to walk the streets of Israel. He'll have to flee to the United States and seek asylum or disappear behind bars, as several of his predecessors have already done. Now, I wouldn't like you to have the impression that these hundreds of thousands on the streets to get rid of Netanyahu want a more humane policy towards the Palestinians. That's very definitely not true. I wouldn't like you to think that Benny Gantz would be any better than Benjamin Netanyahu, because that is very definitely not true. In fact, you could make a case that Netanyahu is the least extreme member of his current cabinet. Just think about that. The situation in Gaza yesterday went from bad to worse. The worst day of the war was yesterday. In the middle of a British general election, in the middle of an American presidential election, the policies of both American and British governments towards the conflict in Gaza are right at the center of public discourse, if not media discourse, in the election in both countries. 274 refugees in the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza. 274 people were killed. 75% of them women and children. They were murdered by gunfire or by bombs. The Israeli Air Force flattened the camp with bombs, and a group of Israeli commandos who came in via the United States pier that they built for humanitarian purposes in Gaza were smuggled in under the cover of being aid. The trucks came in purporting to be full of food and medical supplies for the stricken, famine-stricken, ailing people of the Gaza Strip. But in fact, they were filled with Israeli gunmen who dismounted from the trucks and massacred everyone that they saw. They massacred small children, they massacred bigger children, they massacred women, they massacred men. They massacred anybody, everybody that they saw. And the death toll is only half of the story. 274 were killed, but 700 were wounded, maimed, many of them forever. I just saw a figure that 16,000 Palestinian children have died in the last 8 months at the hands of the Netanyahu murder gang. But twice that number, 32,000 Palestinian children have had their limbs amputated. And I've now just saved on my phone a picture the likes of which I never imagined that I would see. A small Palestinian child in Gaza, dead in the mouth of a dog. The dogs are feasting on the bodies in Gaza. And what a feast they had yesterday. I'm spending more time than usual on that point for this reason. I have watched the British media, and I understand the American media is even worse. I've watched the British media on this all day, and every single outlet has treated what happened in Nuseirat camp yesterday as a triumph, as a kind of raid on Entebbe, as a kind of adventure story, when in fact it was an act of criminal lawlessness, illegal under every article of war, illegal under the Geneva Conventions, illegal under the laws against crimes against humanity. This use of firepower from the air and from the land, killing and maiming the best part of 1,000 people to rescue 4 hostages, is an extraordinary indictment on our own media and on the Israeli state itself. But here's the rub. Even if they don't care, about the Palestinian blood that was shed in oceans yesterday in a refugee camp where everyone in it is a responsibility of the so-called international community under international law. The ocean of Palestinian blood wasn't mentioned, but neither was the fact that the Israeli terror gang also slaughtered 3 other hostages. They murdered 274 people, maimed 700 people, and murdered 3 of their own hostages, one of them an American citizen. This has been completely blacked out of the media coverage of this event. It's being treated as a kind of Super Bowl event, when in fact it is a war crime. It is a war crime to kill hundreds of people, to recapture 3 of your own, 2 of whom were Israeli soldiers. Most of you have been led to believe that these Israeli hostages were young women just strolling down the street. 2 of the 3 were Israeli soldiers, prisoners of war. And the 3rd was the chief security officer at the Nova Music Festival, which was a target in the end for the Palestinian resistance groups when they broke out of the concentration camp on October the 7th. And many people were killed there. Many of them were killed by the Israeli forces themselves. Many, no doubt, were killed by the organizations, not just Hamas, but many organizations involved in that concentration camp breakout on October the 7th. So the 3 that they rescued were all security people, 2 of them military prisoners of war. The 3 who they killed included an American tourist with an American passport in their pocket. And the American government has hailed the operation as an unqualified success. And nobody gives a toss about the 1,000 Palestinian refugees, 1,000 who were either murdered or maimed in that attack. And therein lies the problem we have. Jackson Hinkle is in Russia. He's at the St. Petersburg Forum that our own Scott Ritter was forbidden to attend in the land of the free, in the interests of freedom and all of that. We'll hear from Jackson right after this. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows. Some of us are old enough to have opposed first time around the idea that our young people denied a job, denied education that they can afford, will instead be sent out to pick up the trash. Compulsory sent out to pick up the trash. We won't have it. We won't stand for it. I'll agitate here on the mother of all talk shows against it, and as the leader of the Workers' Party of Britain, I say no. Our workers demand dignity, demand decent wages, demand employment protection. We will not allow jobs to be diluted. We will not allow jobs to be spoiled by free labor, compulsory labor. We call that slavery, you see.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So we've got a poll, as always. 32,929 have already voted, so that's almost 33,000 already. We've got a record audience for the first 20 minutes of the show tonight. Will Israel ever accept a two-state solution? Answer, yes or no. You can vote on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway. You can vote on my Twitter, vote on the YouTube community poll, and vote on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and don't forget to share with all your friends and contacts. If you want to comment on anything you hear or wish that you had heard on the show, here are the numbers. It's toll free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344, and it's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number is 44203 966 2625. Now, as I said, Scott Ritter was stopped from boarding the plane in New York to attend and give a talk amongst very distinguished international company at the St. Petersburg International Forum. I was myself invited to it, but plainly am otherwise engaged. But one of the distinguished participants was Jackson Hinkle, our man in St. Petersburg, or Leningrad as it will always be to me, Jackson. Welcome to the show. First of all, explain to the viewers, if you will, what this forum was all about and what level of people were participating in it.
Thank you for having me on, George. And I first have to say big congratulations to the Workers' Party, everything you guys are doing. I wish you all the best of luck in the upcoming general elections. And yes, the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is, it's a very special event. There was 12,000 people from over 100 countries present in St. Petersburg over the last several days. In a lot of ways, what is portrayed as a business and an economic forum, but the end goal is this is a coming together of the free and sovereign people of the world to pursue the agenda of multipolarity, to free 99% of the world from the 1% in the West that is stepping on their necks. So it was an incredible forum. I participated in, several panels, of course, panels which were supposed to include Scott Ritter and Judge Napolitano from the United States. Unfortunately, the U.S. State Department had other ideas, and they prevented Scott Ritter from joining us. His voice was seriously missed, although on one of the panels he was able to tune in via video link and gave some very insightful commentary. But I was really upset because he missed my favorite panel, which was the panel we did with Professor Dugan and with Maria Zaharova, Pepe Escobar, and several other individuals.
It sounds like Russia ain't that isolated after all then.
No, not at all. In fact, at the forum, it was so busy and so crowded. You had to essentially storm through the crowds as if you were a running back in the National Football League to make it through all of the dense crowds of people. So Russia's not isolated. In fact, at the plenary session, there was a beautiful coming together of Bolivian President Luis Arce and the president from Zimbabwe. They had a conversation with President Putin about, de-dollarization, BRICS, and anti-imperialism. It's about as not isolated, I think, as you could get as a country.
I was terribly upset in the midweek, and my clip on it has gone viral in Russia, at the obscenity of Zelensky and the Germans being at the commemoration of D-Day, while the country which took 8 out of 10 Nazi casualties, killed 8 out of 10 Nazis killed in the Second World War, did more than anybody else, did more than everybody else put together. Russia was not invited to the 80th anniversary. Were people in Russia also upset by that, or have they become inured to it now?
I think in a lot of ways they've gotten used to it. You heard Putin refer to the West as a bunch of hyenas in his plenary session speech, and it's 100% true. I mean, if you looked at the events in France and Normandy this past week, one would think that the Nazis won World War II, which, if anyone has taken the time to look at how the United States treated the Nuremberg trials, in a lot of ways that's actually kind of true. But, you have Ukrainian far-right nationalists, Nazis that are there. You have the fringe that are there that are supporting the Ukrainian nationalists. And you have the United States, which is participating in this as well. The Germans there at the celebration. And then the Russian people are not allowed to attend. I mean, again, if you look at this from a 30,000-foot view, not knowing the history of the past, several decades, you would have thought that just looking at that celebration alone, that the Nazis won World War II.
It's incredible. Let's talk about Germany, Jackson. The results are in. Little soldier Scholz has lost. He's called a socialist prime minister on the BBC website. I have no idea what could possibly be socialist about him. But if that is socialism, then I don't want anything to do with it, to be honest. And the far right, as they're described, AfD, have won the election. Now, one of their platforms was ending the posture of belligerence towards Russia, which has cost Germany everything. Cost them a very long, cold winter. I can tell you, I was frequently there. And the situation is backside for elbow. It is upside down. It is the right that are demanding peace with Russia and the left that are demanding war with Russia. What's your take on what happened today in Germany?
Well, I'm constantly reminded of the history of the Trotskyists that allied with the Nazis in more ways than one against Stalin. And I think when people call themselves socialists today in the West, a lot of them are just Trotskyists cosplaying as communists, because communists are the heroes of history. And what we're seeing today is just it's another iteration of that. Olaf Scholz is in no way, shape, or form a socialist. If he was a socialist, he wouldn't be supporting the far-right Nazis in Ukraine. And he surely wouldn't have abandoned the people of Germany over the past several years by making them essentially starve and go without energy, low-cost energy, because they wanted to sanction Russia for virtue signaling politics. I mean, it is a horrific state of affairs, and I'm not surprised that, the German public voted against him. I guess we'll have to wait and see what the new elections or the new government will present us with. But ultimately, I don't think there are many legitimate voices within the European Union that are actually going to be committed to building a multipolar world. Sure, maybe they're going to be a little bit less hawkish when it comes to Russia, but even the voices that are less hawkish when it comes to Russia are either extremely pro-Israel or they are anti-China. And that is nothing that should be celebrated. We should be very clear about the reality of this situation.
Well, I said in my monologue that one after the other of these so-called far-right, so-called nationalist groups, despite all their anti-globalist rhetoric, take the knee to the empire. Meloni was one. Le Pen looks like she's shaping to be the other. Is there any confidence in Russia that German policy will now change?
If I had to be 100% honest, as a non-Russian who's in Russia, I think that most Russians really don't care all that much about Germany right now, or any of the West for that matter. I think that Russia is focused on the sovereignty and the prosperity of Russia for Russians. I think they have a beautiful relationship that is developing with China, with Iran, with other BRICS members, some that are soon to join in October at the next BRICS summit. And ultimately, Russia is nowhere near as obsessed or concerned with Western states and, who the next government is as Western states are concerned and obsessed with Russia. And Vladimir Putin has, said this for many years. There's the brilliant series of documentaries that Oliver Stone did on Vladimir Putin. And one thing that struck me in the interviews that Oliver Stone did, Putin responded by saying, it doesn't really matter who the new government is, who the new face is in the United States. Doesn't matter if they're a Republican, a Democrat, if they say they're going to be friendly or antagonistic to Russia. At the end of the day, we always get the same sort of leadership from the West.
It is, of course, inescapable that I ask you about the extraordinary mishaps of your country's president on the stage in front of all the world leaders, in front of the veterans, in front of the watching public throughout the world. And I ask it in this context. The British Prime Minister appears to be about to quit in the middle of a British general election and likely replaced as an interim with Lord Cameron, the former Prime Minister David Cameron. That's never happened before. But so many things nowadays have never happened before, but they're happening now. I'm wondering if the state of Joe Biden is such that even at this ridiculously late hour, the Democrats are going to have to shuffle him off the stage.
It's a good question. I don't know the answer, but it's a very good question. And your point about Sunak brings an interesting potential comparison. There's no way of really knowing, because ultimately the situation is so horrific right now with Biden relieving himself in front of the French president that you'd think if this was going to happen, they would have done it months ago. But we still haven't seen that. As Biden was relieving himself in a suit in front of the French president, I was walking to listen to President Putin give a 4-hour lecture on the intricacies of Russian and multipolar economics. So the situation is very grim in the United States. I don't know what's going to happen. I can only hope that we don't have someone as mentally unwell as him leading our country for any longer than we have to have it.
Well, it could be laughing gas Kamala Harris. I mean, she probably won't relieve herself on stage in front of the watching world, but once she opens her mouth, she might as well, because what comes out of her mouth is not that different from Joe Biden's backside. Jackson Hinkle, as always, a pleasure to deal with you. Thanks so much indeed. Enjoy St. Petersburg for as long as you are there. Jackson Hinkle, political analyst and host of The Dive. Thank you for joining us. Will Israel ever accept a two-state solution? Yes or no? 33,000 of you have voted. You've still got plenty of time to have your say, yes or no. BBC reporting that exit polls in France suggest a historic win for Le Pen's party National Rally, with 30% of the compared to Macron's party on 15% of the vote. How about that? Le Pen with double the vote of little Emmanuel Macron. These are dramatic times. You've come to the right place on the mother of all talk shows, live from Rochdale. On YouTube, Keith Mitchell says, your success in Rochdale has made many, many more than just those who voted for you. As Roger Waters' mum says, do the right thing, George. Keep right with those in Rochdale and they will stand by you at the general election. I want to thank the great Roger Waters for his fulsome support in the contest. I want to thank Low Key, our own considerable genius, for coming to Rochdale and performing so brilliantly, so dazzlingly in the constituency. I want you all to write this down. I was listening today to Low Key's track, Long Live Palestine. And I always knew that it was musically extremely beautiful and inspiring. You know, the one with the chorus, Free, Free Palestine. But today, for some reason, in a car, I played it and I listened very carefully to the lyrics, which proved to me again that Low Key isn't just a recording artist, isn't just an indefatigable activist. He is a professorial political genius. So write it down, Long Live Palestine. Watch it on Spotify at the end of this show by Low Key, Lowkey.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Okay, in the last 3 minutes, Benny Gantz has resigned, Gadi Eisenkot has resigned, and Avi Rosenfeld has resigned. The Israeli government is crumbled and fallen from within. Now, don't forget, if you've just joined the show, you can download the MOATS podcast from tomorrow morning. You get a compressed, bite-sized version straight to your phone or computer. This week, we are in the top 5 in Antigua and Barbuda, Kuwait and Qatar. And we are charting in over 100 countries and territories worldwide. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. Will Israel ever accept a two-state solution? Yes or no? Over 34,000 people have now voted. Let's try and get that over 40, shall we? Susie is on the line from Dunstable in England on the British general election. Go ahead, Susie.
Hello, George. Thank you for letting me ask just one question. My question is,
sure.
If the Conservatives and if Labour and Lib so rubbish, which I really hope they are, and don't win or don't get enough seats, and I really sincerely hope, and I sort of pray every night that you will get in. But if I think, what's he called, Nigel Farage, he's sort of coming up a bit, let's supposing that you and Nigel had enough seats between you to form a coalition government, how would you feel about that? What would you do?
Well, we have really major differences. We have some things in common. We campaigned together for Brexit. He was the leader, but I played quite a significant role. I had specific duties and I delivered on them. And we both think that Brexit has been a wasted opportunity, that the Conservatives haven't really Brexited at all. They have in form, but not in substance. But Nigel Farage and I have very different views on foreign policy. He is beholden to NATO and the United States, though once he wasn't. He is therefore extremely hostile to Russia, although once he wasn't. And he has discovered an evangelical zeal in hatred of Palestinians and support for Israel, though once he didn't. So it would depend which Nigel Farage turned up. What I think, and it's not likely that him and us will win enough seats to form a government. Of course, it's possible. Anything is possible. If everybody votes for all of our candidates, I might be a candidate for Prime Minister. That's true. But it's not likely, although we'll both make a major breakthrough, that we will have enough MPs to form a government. But we'll definitely be the opposition. There's no doubt about that. It won't be the Tories, Penny Mordaunt or Suella Braverman. They won't be the opposition to a Starmer-led Labour government. It'll be Farage on one side and me on the other. He's eating the Conservatives from the right. We are eating Labour from the opposite side. And he's eating some of Labour also in the Red Wall, in places like here in Rochdale, for example, where they got rid of their idiot savant Danchuk as their candidate, you know, the one who said it was a two-horse race between me and him, and he came sixth in that two-horse race. They've got rid of him, unhinged, and replaced him with a much more respectable candidate. And Farage is putting a big push in here in Rochdale. As a matter of fact, it might actually be a two-horse race here in Rochdale by the end of it. So we'll definitely be the opposition. For this reason, apart from any other, Susie, that Farage stands for something, I stand for something, the Labour and Conservative leaderships stand for nothing, fall for anything. And they can't even speak human. They can't speak British. They can't talk to ordinary British people. That's why none of their appearances, none at all, are with unsupervised crowds. And they're not even crowds. The cameras are instructed to so narrow their focus that 12 people looks like a crowd. They hire big auditoria and assemble 12 people in front of a few, behind a few Corex boards, and that's supposed to be a rally, when it's 12 of their own staff, their own families. So Farage is actually out amongst the public. I'm actually out amongst the public. There are dangers, of course. The Home Office have just given me an armed security man to be with me because of the number of death threats that I have been receiving. I'm sure that Farage has got the same thing now as part of the same Home Office initiative. Farage has already been attacked in Clacton, but I'm sure he's going to be elected. And if he is elected and I'm elected, we'll be the two benches to watch in the next British Parliament, one way or another. Susie, thanks for your kind call. Mormon in Detroit, Michigan is up about Palestine. Go ahead, Mormon.
Hello, Mr. Galloway. I'm honored to be able to talk to you one more time. I wanted to call because I initially wanted to talk about the state of Israel being basically, they call it a democracy. I've said it's more like a parastocracy because it is a parasitic country. It has leached on to the Palestinian people. It sucks as every possible dollar it can from their taxes, from money that is brought in from around the world. And you know what it does about money from the United States, so you know what kind of a country Israel is. But I decided not to talk about that because of what happened to Nazaret refugee camp, because it brought back another call I had made to you several months ago when I had told you about a young Palestinian man that I had run into here in Dearborn who described this very awful encounter that he had had. And he described it in very descriptive Arabic, which I speak and understand. But the thing about Arabic is that it's not, you can never call it, for instance, the language of medicine or science or high tech. That would be German, Russian, and especially English. But it is a very descriptive, poetic language that when it wants to bring across a point, it can very easily do that. I had been affected by the story that he told, and I had written down something about it a couple of weeks later. I read it to several people, and they often tell me that I should read this as often as I can, or I had actually, I believe they even put this in the local papers. One of the local Arab American papers published this. So if you have just 70 seconds for me, I've timed this. I wanted to read this very quickly, what I had written about this encounter and what this young man described. Here it is. I can no longer shake the images. They are always there. Certain ones linger harder. They go where I go. They go everywhere. Then there are those that lurk just beyond my vision. They wait to pounce to block out the sun. There are some that never go away. They haunt my nights and follow me day after day. Of a certain one I can't escape. It is of a child's body hanging from a fence. But good God Almighty, it has no legs. There's another picture just beyond the outer wall. It is terrifying beyond belief. Rescuers had come upon the feet of a child sticking out from in between two concrete slabs. So they unfolded a body bag and raised up on the upper slab. But as they pulled the small body away from the rubble, a stream of bloody brain matter emanated, oozed from the crushed skull to lay down a disturbing trail, in the midst of which an intact eyeball had dropped into the goop, facing upwards, staring accusingly at the men. The second eyeball had also escaped the crushed skull, swaying precariously from its optic nerve. Grown men, strong men, hardened men that had seen it all, had never seen this, could not endure this. They dropped the small body and ran in horror in all directions. When they met up again the next day, they discovered that all three had done the same exact thing. They had run nonstop to find their loved ones, to touch them, to hold them, and most importantly, to look them in the eye.
Wow. That was a knockout, Mormon. You nearly brought a tear to my eye, and I'm grateful to you for calling in with that remarkable piece of writing. I only have one dispute with what you said earlier in the call. I doubt if it can be said that Arabic is not a language of science, because the Arabs invented science. The Arabs invented algebra and geometry when my people were living in the forest and painting their faces blue. And so far as I know, they invented it in Arabic. Beautiful, powerful call from Detroit, Michigan. Don't know quite what to say to answer it. Daniel Joliffe says, wait, what? DavidCameron is trying to be PM again? Dear God, please, no. Well, it raises some important constitutional conundrums. There's no parliament that soundings can be taken amongst, and the king informed that so-and-so has the support necessary to form an administration. Because, of course, although there are no MPs now, the government remains intact. So DavidCameron is still the Foreign Secretary, and Rishi Sunak is still the Prime Minister, and so on. But the constitutional position, as I understand it, would be this: that Rishi Sunak would go to the palace and tender his resignation as Prime Minister and advise His Majesty that Lord Cameron had the support necessary to form a temporary administration, and that King Charles would be asked to endorse that. As I say, we've never been here before. We've never been in these waters before. But that's how I see it playing out, and many, many other people in newsrooms up and down the country this evening also see it. Ronan Makarevi says, don't forget all the blood on Teflon Dave's hands. Libya was his watch. Indeed, Ronan, it was. On line one is Martin in Aylesbury in England about checkers. I'm all intrigued. Martin, what is it?
Hello, George. It's an honor to be on your show, and I would like to thank you for fighting for Palestine and voicing many of my own views that have gone unheard for such a long time. So really, it is wonderful that a fighter has got up to do that job in England. I myself have been fighting for 10 years to try and get checkers given back to the people. I'm a pagan and a healer, and I teach a breathwork system, healing system called holographic breathing. and I'd go up to the land around Chequers, and I'd make videos of it there. And I discovered, because I've worked the energies of the Ridgeway, which is a sacred, it's a pilgrimage route that travels across southern England along the Ridgeway, and it's a 6,000-year-old right of way. And working with the energies there, I discovered that the Ridgeway goes 20 meters in front of the mansion at Chequers. I could feel it going there. I was thinking, my God, that's the Ridgeway. It's going through Chequers. And then when I looked, you can follow the ridge, and that is exactly where it is. It goes pretty well through the mansion.
Wow.
And that is a right of way for everybody in England. And I've sent a picture.
Well, I certainly support. I mean, I can't go with you on some of the things you said, Martin, but it does seem to me extraordinary that Chequers and all the land around it was given to the people by its owner, and yet has become effectively a walled garden in which the worst people in the country and some of the worst people in the world are billeted at weekends. I thought you were going to say to me that you had detected some unusual activity around Chequers. Why don't you take those skills of yours up to the fence now and see if you can detect who's coming and going? Could be important. Martin in Aylesbury. Simon is from Weaponized News, although we know him as our own professor, Simon, in Florida. Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, I'm in.
Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway, and to your worldwide audience. Whilst it's been the most...
The wrong link, I could tell the link.
Whilst it's been a most terrible
time... Go ahead,
time
you're on.
For the... Yes, whilst it's been a most terrible time, obviously, for the Palestinians, the one country that has been having a quite astonishing performance has been that of Turkey, starting off by a very prestigious visit to China on the beginning of the week, where the foreign minister gave a speech on Turkey and the changing world order at the Chinese Center for Globalization, and then in response to a question announced that Turkey would be applying to join BRICS. He then hosted the D8, which was 8 of the largest Islamic countries in the world, in Istanbul, put out a very, very strong statement indeed, calling for worldwide economical sanctions against the nation of Israel. And then he flew to the Gulf Cooperation Council, had individual meetings with all 6 of those countries' foreign ministers, participated in a joint statement there. And now we learn that he's on his way to Russia as an invited guest at the BRICS foreign ministers meeting, where the Turks, rather extraordinarily, have also published all 14 other nations that have been invited by the Russians to attend as prospective BRICS members. So we now have that full list. Now, what Mr. Hinkle didn't mention in his interesting appearance review was the focus for President Putin's speech at the beginning of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum was very, very much focused, as the name would suggest, on economics and trade routes. And he specifically mentioned the Northern Sea route through the Russian-controlled Arctic and the middle corridor going from China to Europe, and also the international north-south transportation corridor, which just this week has been announced will now be doing massive coal shipments from Russia to China. But what happened today was the Iraqi prime minister, having just opened up a huge gas works completed by a Chinese construction company, sat down with them on air and announced that he was willing to make Iraq's largest infrastructure project, going from Basra diagonally across the country to the Turkish border, to be part of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. So whilst it is truly tragic that there's still enormous massacres occurring in Palestine, as our eyes are diverted from other parts of the world, huge international logistical changes are taking place. And I have been speculating on weaponizednews.com that 10 countries might join BRICS in the meeting in Kazan in October, but it looks like it could be even more than that.
Wow. That's a lot of incredibly important information to pack into 2 minutes. And I'm sorry that that's all we could give you, because we are on KPFK, that's 90.7 FM across Los Angeles and Southern California. And we don't just have our own time limits to meet, we have to coincide with theirs. Brilliant, Simon. Weaponizednews.com is where you can learn even more from our professor in Florida. Coming up after the break is the General's son, the one and only Miko Peled, who joins us on a night of dramatic developments in Israel. Who better to be on the show to discuss them than Miko Peled? He's coming up right after this short break. Stay tuned. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Israel ever accept a two-state solution, yes or no? And what would constitute a two-state solution in any case? You know my views on it. I think you probably know my next guest's views on it. But first, I'm going to ask him what on earth is going on inside the Israeli government. He is Miko Peled, Israeli author and activist. Miko, I'm having to struggle to keep up with the news. The ministers are resigning one after the other. What does it all mean?
I don't think it's anything. First of all, great to be with you again, George. Thanks for having me. I don't think this is any more than the usual musical chairs that we see in Israeli governments from time to time. Everybody wants to be in the big chair. Everybody wants to be in the prime minister's seat. And whenever they sense that there might be a political moment there where they can do that, they jump at it. So now Gantz thinks that he might have an opportunity, to jump in and become the prime minister. It's all about that. It's really not about ideology. It's certainly not about the Palestinians. It's about public opinion. It's some poll probably told him that if he jump ship now, then he has a better chance at the next elections. It's that sort of thing. It's a typical, you've seen this for decades. It's typical musical chairs that we see in Israeli politics over and over again. I don't believe Netanyahu is going anywhere. I think all these attempts to get rid of him are not going to work. But that's really what this is about.
I wonder why, though, the deep state in Israel has one just like we all do, doesn't calculate that at least changing the lipstick on the pig would be a wise thing to do, given the catastrophic collapse in Israel's standing and leverage, therefore, in the world. I know you may say, well, the world is still giving them everything that they want, but the world governments that are paying a higher and higher price for it with their own public opinion. and one must assume that the day may come when they're no longer prepared to meet that price. So why don't they get rid of Netanyahu?
Well, first of all, it's not that easy. He's the one who he holds all the cards, and I think at the end of the day, as you know, it's all about negotiating and putting together a coalition. And as you know, even when he lost the elections, he was still able to become prime minister because he knows how to build a coalition, and people listen to him. And I think so far, as long as he's been around, he's been the only grown-up in the room. All the other politicians look like children around him. So granted, there's pressure from here and pressure from there, but at the end of the day, getting rid of him is not so easy. He's got obviously the support that he needs to remain politically. His constituents feel that he's doing exactly what they want him to do. I mean, there's some dissent, but basically his main constituents like what he's doing. And getting rid of him is not so simple. He's very, very much entrenched in, first of all, in the prime minister's office, but in Israeli politics for as long as I can foresee anyway.
The proximate reason for the revolts going on the street in Israel are about the attitude to freeing the hostages, aren't they? So they made a celebration, a kind of Super Bowl event of rescuing 4 hostages yesterday. We'll come to the price of that in a minute. But they killed 3 others. And in fact, they've killed at least a dozen, maybe 20 of their own hostages. This must be creating fissures because these people have all got families. These families have all got friends, and they've got political forces and media forces that are prepared to highlight the plight that they have. Talk us through the impact, if you will, of yesterday's events from the Israeli perspective.
You know, when you listen to the Israeli news channels and the talking heads on all the news programs, just the brutality of the discourse, the violence of the discourse is really, it reaches levels that are decibels that are unbelievable, even by Israeli standards these days. Now, we all know this hostage could have been released, 6 months ago. Hostages are not the issue. It's about public opinion, and the hostages are just little pieces, political chess peons, if you will. That's really all they are. And so at the end of the day, if, nobody, the family members care, and the small group of, or the 40% or so that hate Netanyahu and that have been in the streets in previous years trying to get rid of him are still there and still hate him and still want to get rid of him. They still don't like the fact that he's in a coalition with Smotrich and Ben Gvir, these rabid settlers, these gangsters. But by and large, he's got a majority, and he's succeeding. And the discourse is leans more towards we need to hit Hamas. Why did we not hit them more? What the hell are we doing negotiating with these people? We should have killed them. We should have killed more of them. You know what I mean? That's the discourse that you hear channel after channel after channel. From time to time, you hear somebody, sheepishly say, yes, but the hostages, yes, but negotiations. But by and large, we are we're seeing very broad public support and support in the media for this maniacal, sadistic genocide that's going on in Gaza, even if it means killing the Israeli hostages. And we know that the hostages have not been on any, they've not been a priority for Israeli politicians at all from the very beginning, or else they would have been freed by now.
This brutalization that you describe of the discourse, and I agree with you, I've been following it for many decades, has led Haaretz, which is no peacenik organ, to, in its editorial today, to say that this brutalization taking place within Israeli society is existential in its potential, that Israel could be destroying itself in this kind of spiral downwards and in this brutalization. Do you think that has any traction anywhere?
I don't think it has any traction within Israel or within Israeli society, because everybody lives in that same bubble. Everybody lives in the same insane reality where all they see is this desire for more Palestinian blood. That's the emotion. That's how people are talking. You know, they want more Palestinian blood. They want more destruction. They want no negotiations and so on. But this is the monster that is consuming itself, and at the end of the day is going to destroy itself. I don't think there's any question that Israel is in the process of destroying itself. And we're seeing it move now in leaps and bounds, precisely with what you described.
Well, they got plenty of blood yesterday, a record amount, I think, in a single attack on a refugee camp, one I know well as it happens. They killed 274 people and rising, but they maimed 700 others. I mean, that's a major piece of slaughter, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, there's no reason. I don't think there was any reason to. There wasn't any reason to expect that this wasn't going to happen. The slaughter will continue. The slaughter of Palestinian, this butchery, this madness, this sadistic madness is going to continue as long as Israel is allowed to go on. Unless there are severe sanctions imposed, until there's a total arms embargo imposed, this is not going to stop. And as you know, Netanyahu is scheduled to come and speak in front of Congress next month. You know.
Yeah, that's going to be quite an event. That's going to be quite an event, because feelings are running high, not in the Congress, of course, they're all bought and paid for, but amongst the general public, Democrats in particular. 80% of the Democratic Party's voting base has for months supported a ceasefire. But the American government and the so-called American opposition, Zion Dawn versus Butcher Biden, they're in a kind of Dutch auction to demonstrate who can be the most horrific on this subject. There's bound to be big public events outside in Washington on the streets against Netanyahu's visit. And I was wondering if he might just stay there. But you've set my mind at rest that he's not going anywhere soon. I thought it might be a good way to evade justice if he stayed in the United States. But obviously I'm barking up the wrong tree on that. But the price, this is going back to a point I just made, the price for Western leaders for supporting with blank checks and all that comes with them to the state of Israel is steeply rising, you know. I mean, Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, is in serious trouble in scores, if not hundreds of places, because of the uprising, pro-Palestinian uprising that's taking place amongst the electorate.
Yes, and you know what is even more surprising is that these narrow-minded, small-minded, myopic politicians don't see. They're not even viewing this in light of their own legacy. I mean, who wants to be remembered as the prime minister that called Nelson Mandela a terrorist again? Who wants to be the prime minister that was appeasing Hitler? Who wants to be remembered like that? That's exactly what these people are doing. That's what today's politicians and, elected and non-elected leaders around the world are doing by supporting Israel. This is exactly what they are. And we know that people have a long memory. And now, of course, we have social media. Everything's on video. Everything is recorded. These people are going to be remembered as supporting one of the worst genocides that imaginable, and saying nothing and doing nothing to stop it. Not only doing nothing to stop it, but supporting it and sending weapons and so forth. So to me, that's amazing that folks are excited about their own legacy.
Lastly, if I may, forgive me. If I may, it seems obvious to me that pier, which we never believed, you and me, to be a humanitarian pier in the first place. We thought it was for shipping the Palestinians out. But it turns out, actually, to have been a military facilitator of this massacre, which will never be forgotten. Almost 1,000 people killed and wounded in one attack. And it seems they came in on aid trucks into that Joe Biden pier.
Yes, the collaboration with this is collaborating with the Nazis. I don't know how else to say it. And then inviting Hitler to speak at Congress while the Holocaust is going on. I don't know that there's any other way to emphasize just how horrific this is. This is collaborating with the Nazis during the Holocaust, during World War II, and then inviting Hitler to speak in Congress. This is what this is. I think Washington, D.C., I'm actually quite doubtful that he will actually come. I think for security reasons, they might cancel it, because I think Washington, D.C. will be complete chaos if he does show up. I hope he does. But if he does, I think it's going to be complete chaos.
Pleasure, honor to talk to you. Miko Peled, Israeli author and activist. Very great use you have been. Thank you so much indeed. Will Israel ever accept a two-state solution? Yes or no? 36,000 people have voted. You've still got half an hour. Let's get this to 40,000. If you haven't voted yet, vote on my Telegram, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. It's pretty overwhelming. No, 96, 90, 93, 93. But I would like that to be of an even more representative poll. That's why I'm pushing you to get that up from 36,000 to 40,000 by the end of the show. The US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. The UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number, 0044 203 966 2625. Now, breaking. French President Emmanuel Macron has just announced on national television in an emergency live address the dissolution of the National Assembly of France and is calling a snap election, with the first round to be held on June the 30th. This breaking development follows devastating EU election results for his party, where he received 15% of the vote compared to Le Pen's National Rally, which achieved 34% of the vote. If you're watching the mother of all talk shows tonight, you definitely came to the right place on the right time. It is a night of astounding developments. Let me take a quick break.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As Vischer says, the Twitter sphere where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Mr. President, we got a report of a 50-foot woman marauding through Washington, sir.
Thank you, Captain. But I'm looking for a shorter woman, one who likes to take long strolls in the park and yell at minorities.
She's not looking for a date. She's terrorizing the city.
Is there a difference? A little levity. Call in the military.
We are the military, sir.
Boy, we got here fast. We better do something, right?
Shall I scramble the jets, Mr. President?
No, thanks. I'll just take a muffin and some coffee.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, just to recap, while I've been on air, that is 1 hour and 21 minutes, the French have called an emergency general election because the president has just polled 15%, whilst the so-called far-right nationalists have polled 34%, calling into question the entire presidency of Emmanuel Macron. And if they were really a far-right nationalist organization, if they were really French patriots, it would call into question France's entire foreign policy orientation. We'll see if it does. I reckon it won't. In the same European Parliament election, little soldier Scholz, the so-called socialist Chancellor of Germany, has been soundly beaten by the so-called far-right, so-called nationalist AfD, Alternative for Deutschland. And Netanyahu has lost Benny Gantz and at least 2, maybe 3 other ministers from his cabinet. Just musical chairs, as Miko Peled thinks, or more significant, we'll see in the hours to come. But we brought you that Macron news, by the way, faster than Sky News brought that to their viewers. So a big thanks to my editor and my director for handling that very, very dramatic news indeed. If this is reflected in the British general election, Nigel Farage will be the Prime Minister of Britain on the 4th of July. Just think about that. Nick is in Los Angeles. He wants to talk about Diane Abbott. I can't imagine why. Enlighten me, Nick.
Hi, George. Good to hear your voice again. And first off, congratulations to Manchester United beating my team, Manchester City, in the FA Cup final.
That's anyway, very big of you. Very big of you, Nick. Thanks.
Yeah, well, it was a good game, and congratulations. Diane Abbott, just one quick question. Diane Abbott, well, 2 questions. The first one is regarding Diane Abbott. Why did she walk back to the Labour Party when she got stabbed in the back? Very much like what happened to, I think, Faiza Shaheen, but she's running as an independent, I think. And secondly, just why were you not on the BBC panel of 7 political parties when Farage was? So that's a tie-in to that Labour and you being ignored.
Well, if you saw, and I feel sure you did, if you saw what I did to the US Senate 19 years ago, almost to the day, you'll know why they won't let me on these debates. It is a democratic outrage. If I'd been on them, I would have dominated the stage. Farage would not have been top dog, but Farage came out as top dog. The first debate between the 2 prime ministers, Starmer and Sunak, was so banal as to be absurd. No one would have crossed the road to hear either of these 2 people utter their banalities and give their non-answers and call each other liars. None of them. If you put little Sunak on Keir Starmer's shoulders, you still wouldn't have a prime minister. It is a sign of very bad times in Britain that these 2 miniatures are still the most likely prime minister of the country, at least the Tories and Labour. You may have heard earlier that the rumour is very strong that Sunak is to step down in the morning and make way for DavidCameron. But that doesn't change my equation much. As to Diane Abbott, you know I like her. She's not a friend of mine, but we have known each other a very long time, even before we entered Parliament 37 years ago on the same day at the same age. I don't want to speak ill of her, but I cannot support her because she is a Labour candidate. And a vote for Diane Abbott is a vote to put Starmer into Downing Street, which I know, and she knows, would be a crime against the British people, a crime against the Labour tradition, a crime against the peoples of the world who'll suffer the consequences as a result. So she's now a facilitator of a crime, and therefore I cannot support her. I can only put it down to a kind of Stockholm syndrome, Nick. After all that they've done to her, she asked for the Labour whip that has lashed her openly and behind the scenes for 5 years. All the scars that she has sustained, she asked them to let her run as Keir Starmer's candidate. It's a kind of masochism. I'm sorry. It's no kinder way I can put that. She could have done what she should have done and announced that she was resigning from Starmer's misnamed Labour Party and stood as an independent, and she would have romped home with a majority even bigger than the one she currently enjoys. I'm very disappointed at what she did. Thanks, Nick, in Los Angeles. Polish Prime Minister, my goodness, the news is coming in thick and fast. Polish Prime Minister, let me leave you cliffhanger on that. The Polish Prime Minister, Tusk, ... You'll have to wait because Jamie in Malaga on Craig Murray is the next call. Go ahead, Jamie.
Good evening, George. Thanks so much again for taking my call. I'm actually calling from the campaign offices of Craig Murray in Blackburn, and really the reason for the call is just that it's great. Yeah, it's excellent. There's a really good group of people and a really good atmosphere, and we're really just calling out to all of the listeners in Blackburn or in the sort of neighbouring regions to come to the office and lend a hand if they can, even if it's only for a few hours in the morning or the afternoon or a few days. We've got accommodation as well for anybody who's coming that needs accommodation, and it's brilliant. Anything they can do, from graphics to leafleting. I'm actually doing a lot of leafleting at the moment and getting a very, very good response from the people of Blackburn. It's a real pleasure. They love Craig. They love you. They love the Workers' Party. So I feel very, very optimistic.
Well, look, Jamie, I visited Craig just a couple of nights ago, and I'm still recovering. I left him at 3:30 in the morning and didn't get home to Rochdale until nearly 4:30, about 4:20. I got into my bed and had to get up early the next morning. So I wholeheartedly endorse the points that you've made about Craig's popularity. He is sweeping the town. He is cleaning up the loyalty and support of all those who oppose genocide, who oppose Labour, who oppose corruption, wherever it arises, whether in Labour or people who pretend to be opposed to Labour, pretend being the operative word. Now, we've just put up a flyer for Craig's next meeting, which is on Thursday at 6:30 p.m. in St. Paul's Methodist Church in Higher Audley in Blackburn. And look at the speakers. Look at that. Craig Murray, Richard Medhurst, and the Honourable Chris Hedges, the man who should be the Secretary of State, at least, of the United States of America. My goodness, how lucky is Blackburn. This is a top-class blue ribbon Rolls-Royce candidate that we've given you here. Craig Murray should be the Foreign Secretary of Britain. And if you elect him and the chips fall the right way and there's a hung parliament, maybe he will be. Even if he isn't, he'll be somebody that you'll always be proud to have elected. The Honourable Craig Murray, former British ambassador, Workers' Party candidate for Parliament in the Blackburn constituency. I salute you, as I'm sure the majority of the audience does. Thanks for that call. The Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, the centrist Civic Coalition, is predicted to win the country's European Parliament election, according to an exit poll released as voting ended. So no upset in Poland, unlike Germany and France. Donald is in Copenhagen, on Denmark. Go ahead, Donald.
Hi again, George. Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you on your successful bid to come into the Parliament, and hopefully if you could become the Prime Minister of England, bringing a voice of logic and reason into the governance, that I'm not a believer, but I would believe in divine intervention if that took place. Now, in regards to Palestine and the two-state solution, I can see that as a possibility. And, of course, it would have to be brought about by something like this, Mark Sykes and Francois Picot, drawing lines all over the Middle East to their borders. That could be done also in this so-called Israel, and draw a line on the southern border of Israel and Gaza, and let the Palestinians live there. And to the north of that, of course, it would displace people, but that's being done now, as we can see. That would be nothing new, to displace a few of the people that live there. But it would bring about a little bit of a better peaceful settlement. But I doubt, in regards to the absolute, seeing a child having his brains blown out by an IDF sniper. I mean, how the retaliation or the resentment, I don't see how anyone would want to retaliate or forgive that or forget that. That's impossible. Then we have, on the other hand, Ukraine and the people supporting that. Here, the Prime Minister of Denmark is supporting this genocide and this invasion of this Ukraine conflict. And by the way, to depict the characterization of a war in Gaza, that's not a war in Gaza, that's an extermination of a population. It's a genocide. Sure. That's exactly what it is.
It's like saying there was a war between Germany and the Warsaw Ghetto. There wasn't. There was an extermination of the prisoners in the Warsaw Ghetto by the beasts of fascism. And that's exactly what's happening here. As the Israeli, son of a general, Israeli general, the General Peled, one of the signatories of the Declaration of Israeli Independence, and his son just told us that actually what's happening in Gaza now is absolutely comparable with the actions of fascists, the actions of Nazis, and that the invitation to Netanyahu to address both houses of Congress is the equivalent, said Miko Peled, of inviting Adolf Hitler to address Congress while the Holocaust was going on. Donald, I don't believe in drawing any more maps on the tiny country of Palestine. So tiny that one park in South Africa is larger than the entire territory of Israel-Palestine. There's enough lines been drawn. No further lines have any meaning, because the territories that were supposed to be in the Oslo Agreement on one side of the line have now been populated by 800,000 illegal Israeli settlers. Gaza, never contiguous with the West Bank, never contiguous with East Jerusalem, is now atomized, utterly atomized. Scarcely a building still exists undestroyed or unseverely damaged. Thanks, Donald. Gordon is in the Isle of Lewis in Scotland on Cameron and Blair. Go ahead, Gordon.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway. This is an unknown fact, but for all you people that are thinking about voting, the Clan Cameron accepted the Knights Templars into Scotland and Glasgow back in 1307. They also ended running the HSBC Bank, which is anybody that knows anything about anything, is the world's biggest drug dealing cartel, hiding weapons kind of bank. It burnt down in Chicago.
Well, I've got to make it clear. Hold on. I've got to make it clear that what you just said about the HSBC Bank was said by you and not by me, and we as a show don't take responsibility for it. You made very serious charges against them. They're not here to defend themselves. If they would like to be, we'll put them on the next show. Please, Gordon, continue, but without defaming anyone on my show, please.
Long story short, the Knights Templar came to Scotland, Dundee. Do you remember a man called Guthrie, another beautiful man with vocabulary such as yourself? You right honourable. Tony Benn, right honourable. Dennis, right honourable. Craig Murray, right honourable. Donald Stewart, right honourable. There's a few others that can be called that. But let's just forward. I went into Peter Haynes' office down in East one day, way back in the last century. I walked in with a brown bag, which I can show you tomorrow night, if you put me on cam on your show. I walked in and says, "I'm a Muslim, boom, you're dead." Anyway, that's a different story. I met Tony Blair December 1997 in Question Time. He came back and shook my hand. I told him he should play guitar the next time. So, George, what I'm trying to say is that, Broski, you've always been true to your word. You've been right honourable. You've been truth. You ate Congress. You ate the Capitol Hill. You showed America for what a farce it was when you did. And I appreciate that, my friend.
Most kind of you. Most kind of you, Gordon.
No.
Most kind of you. No, I need to press on. I need to press on because I've no idea what you're going to say next. And you'll have to forgive me now that we are under intense observation by enemies who appear to have just woken up to the fact that our audience is by an order of multiple magnitudes greater than theirs, have woken up to the fact that we are a clear and present danger to their hegemony over information, that our audience, now well over 3 million every single week, is a threat to them. So I can't allow anyone, I'm not saying you were going to, but I can't allow anyone to defame someone that isn't here to defend themselves. And you were tossing names around there so gaily, I began to get nervous. So I'm sorry if I've been unfair, but that's how I feel. Let's take a quick break, and then it's your show all the way to the end. Stay tuned. Now, you're used to telephoning questions into me on my various shows. I've spoken with thousands of you over the last couple of decades. But now, on my new show, you get a chance to appear in person on a video wall. It would be good to see what you looked like as well as what you sounded like. It's very simple to get on my show. Go to www.haveitoutwithgalloway.com. Just register there. We'll get you on the television with me. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
It is a good show, you know, Have It Out with Galloway. I really do hope that you watch it, and just as much as I want you to join it. haveitoutwithgalloway.com. It's very easy. Just register, and you might well get a call asking you to appear on the video wall and ask whatever question that you would like. Will Israel ever accept a two-state solution? Yes or no? Seems a fairly straightforward question, and we've certainly got a pretty straightforward answer. Overwhelming people do not believe that Israel will ever accept a two-state solution. And, well, the best part of 40,000 people, but not yet 40,000 people, have voted on it. Jay Aidenally says the poll is wrong. The real question will be, will the United States accept a two-state solution? If it weren't for the US, Israel would be 50 times more likely to accept it. The devil is in the details. And Sprinks says, when a poor man asks for money, it's called begging. When a rich man asks for money, it's called fundraising. Very good. Jack Klugman, great name, says the IDF Einsatzgruppen don't miss a trick, using an AidTruck as bait again. It's like they took detailed notes at Holocaust Museum trips. Zubair is in Manchester on the British general election. Although, Zubair, there's general elections breaking out everywhere right now, especially in France. Go ahead. What would you like to say?
Well, first of all, thank you, George, for all the good work that you've been doing over all the years. I've been following you for years. You're probably one of the only honest politicians out there, which is what we need. So my point is more to our fellow listeners than yourself. It's nothing that you don't already know. Now, we elect politicians and we trust them and we enable them to look after other affairs in our best interest and not their own. And we expect them to act with honour and we expect them to, do the right thing, right? Now, the biggest game in town at the moment, the only game in town at the moment, is Gaza and Israel and what's happening there. And our politicians are making such a mess of that how can we trust them to, if they can't do the right thing there, in fact, they're actually enabling it rather than, anything else. If they can't do the right thing there, we cannot be voting for them. So my plea to my fellow listeners is, please, make sure that don't vote for Labour, don't vote for Conservative, vote either for George's party or the Greens or an independent, but somebody else. Because I was speaking to my sister a little while ago. She's a smart, intelligent woman. She's a doctor. Her husband's a dentist, and I asked them how they're going to vote. And they both said, we're not going to bother because we know that Labour are going to win. And I said, look, please don't do that. You've got to vote. Go out there and use it. That's the point I wanted to make, George.
And you made it very well, Zubair. I would have advised you not to believe the theory that our politicians are there to listen to us and to represent us.
It's a lie.
The other
it's a lie.
theoretically correct things that you said. It's all a lie, and it's always been a lie. But you're right, that's the theory. We now know in practice, more clearly than we have ever known, that it is all a lie. That on Gaza, for example, both parties, but we didn't expect anything different from the Conservatives, but Labour in particular, has supported the cutting off of water, electricity and essential services to Gaza. The leader of the opposition, man that wants to be the Prime Minister, said Israel has the right to do that, has repeatedly stated that the Israeli action in Gaza is self-defense and that they have the right to defend themselves. His acolytes from the hideous Idi Amin of British politics, David Lammy, to every level, Lisa Nandy, and all these other factotums, top-notchers in Keir Starmer's Labour Party, have supported with their own lips with their own mouths, with their own faces showing, their own lips moving on television over and over and over again. They opposed a ceasefire. They supported Israel's self-defense actions in Gaza. They prattle about Israeli hostages, but never mention the 10,000 Palestinian hostages, 10,000 of them held in inhuman conditions year after year with no charges, no courts, no rights, 10,000 of them who cry at a drop of blood of an innocent Israeli, but can find no tears at the loss of an ocean of blood of Palestinians, not just the blood of those who died. Ponder that stat I gave you earlier. 16,000 Palestinian children have been murdered in 8 months, but 32,000 Palestinian children have had their limbs amputated. Gaza is now the amputation capital of the entire world. A kind of horror story, a kind of chamber of horrors that people can go and see. A whole people riddled with child amputees. I'm getting angry now. I better go to my good wife. She'll calm me down. Gayatri, on the social media roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
What's rattling? Election after election. 2024 truly is the year of elections. Tony says, George, remember the theory that the Tories only won in 92 because Major wasn't Thatcher, but Kinnock was still Kinnock. Is this, you think, a switch on the cards to make Starmer Kinnock 2.0? He fits the bill for me, he says.
I mean, Starmer's Kinnock without the laughs. Never mind Blair without the laughs. Kinnock was a vacuous, empty windbag who betrayed everybody that ever supported him, who sold out everyone from whom he came and the areas from which he came. And he changed the Labour Party forever in so doing. And the people who went on to create New Labour under Tony Blair were all factotums of Neil Kinnock. They were his aides de camp. But Starmer is standing on the shoulders of these midgets. Starmer is Blair Mark II. And that's why the establishment are trying so hard to put him into power. Even Rupert Murdoch is supporting Keir Starmer. Even the deep state is supporting Keir Starmer. Because, of course, Keir Starmer is a product of that deep state, the state prosecutor. You can't get much more deep state than being the state prosecutor. Although some of the people he didn't prosecute are very much more interesting than the people he did. I think Sunak jumping ship was not expected. I think he's had such a disastrous election campaign. His MPs are in such a state of revolt. He's handing over to Cameron and he'll be on the plane. He won't even turn up for the count in Richmond, Yorkshire, even though he's on the ballot. Any more, Gayatri?
So Wilson says, embarrassing Western leadership, the Midas touch in reverse. All they've done inside their corrupt, greedy bubble is going wrong. Russia, China, Iran, and many other countries now have the measure of these crooks, and sadly, we are going to suffer because of them. The coming elections in the West are a chance to bring the grown-ups and common sense back into politics, so let's not waste it. And this is one from Robin Hansman, who says...
Can I reply to that one? Do you mind if I reply to that one? Because it is so on point. I want to accentuate it or amplify it. It's the Midas touch in reverse. all these Western leaders that have pioneered, forced through all these policies, especially over the last 3 years, are all one by one falling from power. Your own Prime Minister in the Netherlands, probably one of the first to go. The centrists in Italy, second to go. Now Macron in France has effectively fallen. Scholz in Germany has fallen. The Tory Prime Ministers in Britain have effectively fallen. Joe Biden is about to fall. This is the Midas touch in reverse. Whilst, as he says, Russia and China are barreling ahead on a high-speed train to economic prosperity and strength that puts all of us in the shade. But here's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
It would be funny. I would laugh at it. I really would laugh heartily at it. Except the people of Britain, the people of France, the people of Germany are paying the price, are suffering the cost of what their idiot leaders have done. And they just didn't get the chance to bring them down early enough. Any more, Gayatri? We've got time.
Okay, right. I just want to get onto this one from Amir Adam, who says, congrats for the 350th show. Well done. On a different note, if you may, please enlighten the people about the fact that the plug that needs to be pulled is not in Israel or in Gaza. Rather, it's here at home, right here in the US and in Europe. If any intervention is to be made to stop the massacre, that intervention needs to be done not in Israel or Palestine, but here. If we remain delusional about the real cause of this genocide, where the funds and bombs and missiles, impunity and political cover comes from and is provided to the proxy Israel, this will just go on. When Palestine is leveled to the ground, like how Iraq was, like how Libya was, it will happen again and again, as long as we remain delusional to the real root cause. So basically, blaming...
Amen.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Go on.
Well, this basically, he goes on, but you've made this point before. Yes, Netanyahu is in charge of the massacre that's taking place in Gaza. We in Britain, we in Europe, in the US, we can't do much about that, but we can influence the fact of what our leaders at home have in that regards. So this is the point that he made and you made before as well.
Indeed, Karl Liebknecht, for whom we have a score to settle, put it best. The real enemy is at home. Thanks, Gayatri. I'll take you for dinner after the show. Depending on the time we get finished, might need to be just chips in a bag, but we'll have something. Let's go back to the lines if we can. They're slow in coming up. Travis is in Las Vegas. Wow, Las Vegas. Travis, what would you like to say?
Mr. Galloway, first, I'd like to thank you for the work that you've done covering this issue in Gaza and going back to your work with Iraq. And I was a young American guy after 9/11, and I saw, I was cheerleading the war in Iraq like most Americans were at that time, and I came across your debate with Christopher Hitchens in the early days of YouTube. And the impact that debate had on the way that I see the world, that I see the U.S. war machine, and what's happened since, the amount of research I've done since, I can't thank you enough for your work. And I just really want to say thank you.
That's quite a tribute, Travis. I haven't looked at that debate for a very, very long time, many years. But I agree with you, it was a kind of epic debate. Two Brits slugging it out in the Big Apple with thousands of people queuing around the building and paying top dollar for a ticket to get in. There was even a black market in tickets. Christopher Hitchens was past his best by then. I was Muhammad Ali. He was Sonny Liston. But the arguments adduced by him and demolished by me are still relevant and valid today. So people who haven't watched that debate really should do so. My debate with Christopher Hitchens nearly 20 years ago. Carry on, Travis.
I also, as what your lovely wife was just saying about voting in 2024, and I was just reading that 64 countries, total of 49% of the global population is going to vote in 2024. So this year is the most important year possibly in human history for the possibility of achieving change globally. I mean, across Africa, the European Union's voting, Canada's voting, across Asia, 64 countries I just read. So this year it seems like we have a real chance for change. And I think people are starting to wake up to the duopoly here in the U.S. They're starting to see what's going on there in Europe and in the UK. And, I've been active on TikTok a lot recently. And, because of that, I've been able to communicate with people across the world. And it seems like all of us, especially millennials and younger, are seeing what's going on and have been paying attention to what people like you've been saying. And we're ready for a change. And I think this generation is really going to be the one to achieve it.
Well, God willing, Travis, I can't tell you how happy I am about your call. First of all, for your kind words and reminding me of the debate I had with Hitchens. Secondly, the very eloquent and succinct way that you made your points. And thirdly, that you're in Las Vegas. I'm not sure we've ever had a caller from Las Vegas. It shows just how far the mother of all talk shows has traveled. So God bless you and keep you. Thanks indeed for the call. Norma, the legend in Bristol, is on the line, and whenever she's on the line, everybody else has to clear out the way. That's what happens when you're a legend. Norma, what would you like to say?
Hello, George. No, actually, I'm ringing because I may not ring in very often in the future because my health is not very good and I get very tired. And so I'm going into semi-retirement. But, George, I wanted to say I do listen regularly and I have enjoyed listening and contributing for so many years. So I thought I just feel like I can't really do quite what I used to do,
Well, I must say that if you're here announcing your resignation, I don't accept it. We have loved your calls over many years now, and we need to keep having them. I'm a firm believer, Norma, that if you rest, you rust. That's why I will never, ever retire. I'll die here on screen one day. And I appreciate you might not be able to call in every week, but please keep an open invitation from me on your bedside table. You can call any time and you'll be directly put on to the mother of all talk shows, because the MOATS without the legend that is Norma in Bristol isn't worth thinking about. Well, I've not got much time left, and I do have to hit the hour because of our friends at KPFK 90.7 FM across Los Angeles and Southern California. A vast new audience has opened up for us there, and that's very, very important to us, as you can imagine. But I think it's been one of the most dramatic and eventful shows that we have ever done. It's fitting that it was the 350th episode of the mother of all talk shows. So I'm really grateful for all of you who made it possible, all of you who brought me the breaking news, all of you who took the record number of calls that we have received this evening, all of you who provided the record audience, live audience that we have ever had on the show this evening, and to my good wife, who is now effectively double act for me. People say, what are you going to do when you get old? Well, I've got a young wife and she'll be taking over from me, and after her we have between us many, many children. She and I have 3, and I have 3 others. So the Galloways ain't going away anytime soon. Whatever happens to me, And if my Home Office protector happens to look away at the wrong moment over the next few weeks of peril, where I'm out electioneering with people threatening to kill me, then after me comes the rest of the Galloways. It's been marvellous for me. I hope it was for you, and I hope that you'll join me again on Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening in Britain for the midweek Mother of All Talk Shows. And don't forget, Having It Out with Galloway. My new show is worth following. Thanks very much for watching.